You are losing right now, not because you're weak, and not because you're stupid. You are losing because you are paying attention to things that were specifically designed to drain you. Your opponents know exactly what you're watching, and they are using it against you. Here is the uncomfortable truth about your life right now. Every reaction you give, every glance, every response, every emotional flicker is data. Your opponents collect it, they catalog it, and they weaponize it. You walk through your days thinking you're engaged, informed, aware, but awareness without filtration is just surveillance, and you are the one being watched. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this in the 15th century. While other men argued about morality, he studied power. He watched princes win and fall. He documented exactly what separated the ones who survived, and the pattern was brutal. The men who got destroyed were not the weak ones. They were the reactive ones, the ones who simply couldn't control what held their attention, the ones who handed their mental bandwidth over to their enemies, freely, willingly, every single day. Ask yourself this question. How many of your thoughts today were planted by someone else? How many hours did you spend processing information that benefited them and not you? That is not awareness. That is occupation. Your mind is occupied territory, and you handed over the keys. This is not about positivity. This is not about blocking out negativity. This is a military strategy. Selective ignorance, the deliberate, disciplined refusal to engage, is the most underestimated weapon in the psychology of power. And today, you're going to learn how to wield it like a scalpel. Here is exactly what we are covering today. First, why full information is a trap and filtered reality is power. Second, how your reaction is your opponent's ammunition. Third, the art of strategic invisibility, what you stop tracking. Fourth, how to collapse your opponent's mental frame by disappearing from it. Fifth, the covert contract trap and how ignorance breaks it. Sixth, information asymmetry as a weapon, not just a concept. And finally, the seventh stage, building your cognitive iron wall. Stay until the end, because the final principle is the one no one talks about, and it is the one that will make your opponents feel genuinely insane. Let's start with something that will sting. You were taught that being informed is power. You were lied to. Full information. The compulsive tracking of everything your opponent does, says, posts, or thinks, that is not intelligence gathering, that is feeding, and you are the one being fed upon. Here is the psychology. When you monitor someone obsessively, your nervous system locks onto their behavior as a reference point, a benchmark. Your cortisol spikes when they win. Your dopamine dips when they ignore you. Your entire emotional regulation becomes tethered to their actions. You are no longer an independent operative. You are a satellite in their orbit. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. The same logic applies inversely. The intelligence of a strategist can be estimated by what they choose not to track. The fox does not chase every hare that crosses its path. It conserves, it waits, it selects. You are expending elite cognitive resources on people who simply do not merit your attention bandwidth. Here is your tactical move. Audit your information diet this week. Write down every person, platform, and social signal you monitor involuntarily. Circle the ones that trigger an emotional response. Those are the leashes. Cut them, not with drama, not with a grand announcement. Simply stop. Cold, silent, surgical. Ignorance of their movements is not weakness. It is a refusal to be tethered. Now, here is what happens when you stop tracking them. Every response you give is a weapon you hand them. Think about the last time someone provoked you. A comment, a slight, a conspicuous silence, a power move in a meeting. You felt it. Your pulse moved. Your jaw tightened. Something shifted. And in that moment, that single moment, they won. Not because they were right, not because they had power over you, but because you confirmed their model of you. They tested a hypothesis. You validated it. Now they know exactly what lever to pull. This is not philosophy. This is operational psychology. Every reaction you emit is a data point. And data points build maps. Maps get used for navigation. Through you, past you, against you. The hyena does not attack the lion head-on. It circles, it nips, it provokes, it watches, it is studying your reaction patterns. Your composure, or lack of it, is a full intelligence report. Machiavelli was explicit on this. He who becomes a prince through the favor of the people ought to keep them friendly to him. The inverse is equally true. He who cannot control his visible responses loses the credibility of command, instantly, permanently. When did you last react to someone who did not deserve access to your emotional state? Implement the 72-hour rule. When something provokes you, a betrayal, a slight, an unsolicited challenge, you are legally not allowed to respond for 72 hours hours, not because you are passive, because you are processing for strategy, not venting for relief. Most provocations dissolve in that window. The ones that don't, you respond with surgical precision, not spilled emotion. Your second move is to practice reaction latency. Train your face to register nothing, not cold hostility. That is still a reaction, neutral, calm, unreadable. You are not a mirror, you are a wall. But silence alone is not enough. What you stop tracking externally matters just as much as what you stop showing internally. The power of the deliberately blind eye. There is a specific category of information your opponents desperately want you to process. Their wins, their social proof, their upward trajectory. When you track this information, and you know you do, you are participating in a covert contract. Here is how covert contracts work. Your opponent broadcasts status signals. You receive them. Your subconscious calibrates your self-worth against their perceived gains. They never needed to threaten you directly. You threatened yourself using their content as the weapon. This is not paranoia. This is standard social hierarchy manipulation. It runs constantly. It runs on autopilot, and most people never even identify it. The wolf does not watch the peacock display. It is not relevant data. It does not feed the wolf, nor does it threaten the wolf. It simply does not register. Machiavelli observed, "Men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims for his deceptions." The deception here is subtle. It is the belief that tracking your opponent's ascent is useful intelligence. It rarely is. In most contexts, it is psychological warfare delivered without a single word. Identify 3 people whose movements you track involuntarily: ex-partners, professional rivals, social competitors. Block their output from your information streams, not as a symbolic gesture, but as a cold operational decision. What you cannot see cannot recalibrate your internal benchmarks. And here is the counterintuitive move. When you stop tracking them, they will sense it, not immediately, but within weeks. Your absence of reaction to their moves creates a vacuum, and that vacuum, that unexplained silence, is more unsettling to a social competitor than any retaliation. Which brings us to the most psychologically potent tactic in this entire framework. The most destabilizing move you will ever make is to vanish. Here is a psychological fact your opponents do not want you to know. Their mental model of you requires your participation to function. Read that again. Their narrative, the one where they are superior to you, ahead of you, winning against you, needs regular updates from you. Reactions, check-ins, indirect responses, social signals that confirm they still occupy cognitive real estate in your life. When you go dark, their model breaks. Not because you've beaten them, but because you've removed the feedback loop that powered their certainty. This is cognitive dissonance induction by omission. They expect a reaction. None comes. They probe again. Silence. They recalibrate. But without your data, their recalibration is entirely unreliable. They begin to wonder, did they misjudge you? Are you building something they can't see? Are you genuinely unbothered or just strategically cold? That uncertainty is not your problem. That uncertainty is their suffering. Sun Tzu said it cleanly, and Machiavelli lived it. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Disappearance is not retreat. Disappearance is a siege. For the next 30 days, engage in zero-signal output toward your primary psychological opponents. No indirect communication, no mutual social monitoring, no responses to bait, no acknowledgement of their wins. You are a closed system. They receive no data about your internal state. Watch what happens to their behavior within 3 weeks. The ones who double down on provocation are confirming their dependence on your reaction. The ones who go quiet are recalculating. Both are clear victories. You are not ignoring them because you are afraid. You are ignoring them because you have declared their movements strategically irrelevant. But what about the agreements, the unspoken ones, that your silence disrupts? They needed you to play a role. Stop playing it. Most social and professional conflicts are not about what people say they're about. They are maintained by covert contracts. A covert contract is an unspoken agreement. One party creates it unilaterally, never discloses it, and then feels betrayed when the other party doesn't honor it. Your rival assumes, if I achieve more publicly, you will concede hierarchy. You have never agreed to this, but your tracking of their moves, your comparative self-diminishment, and your observable reactions all confirm that you accept the contract's terms. Selective ignorance is how you tear up the contract, not with confrontation, with withdrawal. Machiavelli was clinical on this. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But there is a third position he implies throughout The Prince. The position of the man who is neither tracked nor understood, the genuinely opaque strategist who refuses to participate in the hierarchy games entirely. That man does not fear, he does not love, he simply operates. The lion does not negotiate with hyenas. It does not acknowledge their hierarchy tests. It simply walks past, and by doing so, wins without contest. Identify the covert contracts operating in your professional and personal life right now. Who expects you to track them? Who expects your visible reaction to their wins? Who is running a status game that requires your participation to score points? Write the list, then systematically withdraw your participation. Not aggressively, not passive-aggressively, cleanly, invisibly, like a professional pulling funding from a bad investment. You owe them no explanation. They will feel the withdrawal acutely. And here is what they will never tell you. You know them, they don't know you. That gap is power. Information asymmetry is the foundation of every power structure that has ever existed. The employer knows what others are paid, the employees don't. The negotiator knows their walkaway number, the other side doesn't. The strategist knows their next 3 moves, the opponent knows none. Right now in your social ecosystem, you likely operate with near-perfect information about your competitors, and they have corresponding intelligence on you. You are roughly symmetric, and symmetric information environments neutralize strategic advantage. Selective ignorance breaks this symmetry, but not by making you less informed. It breaks it by making you less readable. Every time you react visibly to their moves, you update their intelligence on you. Every time you post, respond, or signal, you narrow the gap. You are making yourself legible. Stop making yourself legible. Machiavelli was precise. A prince never lacks legitimate reasons to break his promises. Substitute prince for strategist and promises for predictable patterns, and you have the operating principle. You are not obligated to behave consistently in ways that benefit someone else's model of you. Introduce deliberate noise into your behavioral patterns. Vary your response times. Alternate between engagement and silence unpredictably. Make your emotional reactions untrackable. You are not being erratic. You are being strategically stochastic. Every inconsistency you introduce forces your opponent to rebuild their model from scratch. They cannot exploit a pattern they cannot identify. Everything we've covered is preparatory. The audits, the 72-hour rule, the zero signal output, the covert contract dissolution, the deliberate pattern disruption. All of it builds toward this final concept, the cognitive iron wall. Most people's minds are permeable. Information enters, triggers, recalibrates, and reshapes behavior in real time. This is normal. This is how social animals function. But you are no longer building a social animal. You are building a strategist. The iron wall is the state where external information, particularly information generated by people who wish to affect your psychology, hits your mental perimeter and does not penetrate. Not because you are suppressing it, not because you are denying it, but because you have trained your evaluative filter to run a single question before any information is allowed to pass. Does this serve my strategic position, or does it serve theirs? If it serves theirs, if processing it recalibrates your self-assessment, triggers a reaction, or pulls your focus to their frame, it does not enter. This is shadow integration in applied form. Psychologists talk about the shadow as the unintegrated parts of your psyche, the fears, the shame triggers, the competitive wounds that opponents can reach. Your opponents exploit your shadow. Every jab that lands because it found unintegrated territory. The iron wall seals the shadow exits. When you have done the internal work, when you know your shame triggers, your comparison reflexes, your reaction patterns. You can watch opponents attempt to exploit them with something approaching clinical detachment. Count to 3. Watch what happens when someone tries to provoke you, and you simply watch the provocation like a surgeon observing a procedure. No acceleration in your chest, no tightening in your jaw, just observation. They are operating on a patient who is already awake, and they don't know it yet. Machiavelli's deepest insight, buried beneath the tactics and the political counsel, is this: the prince who masters himself has already mastered the field before the battle begins. Self-mastery is not a virtue, it is a strategic asset, and selective ignorance is its sharpest expression. Build a written intelligence protocol for your own mind. Define explicitly on paper which categories of information you will track and which you will refuse. Who gets access to your reaction? Who gets your attention bandwidth? What information, if it enters, serves your position? What information serves only to destabilize you? Treat your attention like a defense budget. Allocate it exactly where it returns strategic value. Refuse everything else entry. This is not arrogance. This is the basic operating posture of every sovereign strategist who has ever held power for longer than a moment. Let's be direct about what we've covered. 7 principles. 1. Unified doctrine. You have been operating with your mental perimeter open, feeding your opponent's intelligence models with your reactions, your tracking, your covert contract compliance, and your behavioral predictability. That ends now. The path forward is not warm. It is not comfortable. It does not feel good in the early days, because the early days are withdrawal. Withdrawal from the feedback loops, the comparison cycles, and the vicarious anxiety of tracking people who do not deserve access to your cognitive architecture. But here is what happens on the other side. Your decisions stop being reactive. They become calculated. Your presence stops being legible. It becomes commanding. Your opponents, who built their psychological strategy on your consistent reactivity, will find that their maps are now entirely useless. Their provocations land nowhere. Their status games score no points. Their covert contracts are void, and they will not tell you this bothers them. But it will bother them deeply, because the most psychologically destabilizing thing one human can do to another is simply stop being predictable. Stop being trackable. Stop confirming their model. Stop playing their game. The wolf does not explain why it walks past. It simply walks past. That is your posture now. But here is the warning. If you close this video and change nothing, if you intellectually appreciate these principles and file them alongside every other piece of tactical content you've consumed without executing, then you have done nothing except update your opponent's intelligence on you. You now know this framework. If you don't implement it, they will still have access to your reactions, your patterns, your emotional perimeter. And the gap between knowing something and operating as if you know it, that gap is exactly where people get destroyed. Information without implementation is performance, and performance without substance is prey behavior. You now have the map. The question is whether you will actually walk the territory. If this framework shifted something in you, subscribe. Not for motivation, not for entertainment, for tactical intelligence delivered weekly. Every video in this series is a weapon built for the people who are done being readable. And drop a comment right now. Write iron wall below if you are committing to building yours. Not because it's a ritual, because the act of writing it is your first zero signal output, a signal sent inward, not outward. Your opponents will never see it. That is the point. Watch the next video. The psychology of strategic silence. How saying nothing destroys dominant personalities. You are going to need it.